we have united once more in the midst of worldwide chaos.
Yeah.
Because, Jason, there was a movie celebrating its 40th anniversary this year.
Yep.
And we're a couple of months behind, so it's not actually this month, but back in June. And I was like, okay, it's got to be Jason.
It's got to be Jason.
I have to have Jason on because we are, of course, talking about the inimitable classic, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
Yes.
Jason, you are...
If you listened to the Anyway, That's All I Got, you know that I would only chime in if I could, mention The Shining somehow.
That is an enormous exaggeration, but sure. Let's go with it. Jason, you're an enormous fan of The Shining.
Yeah. I used to watch a lot of... I don't know if you would do this too, Sam, but I would watch... I would, look up movies in parts on YouTube.
Oh, weird.
Did you ever do that, back in the day?
I've done it for, really weird movies that I can't find anywhere else. The first one that jumps to mind is... This is going to make you laugh. There was an animated Titanic movie shortly after James Cameron's...
The one with the talking mice?
That's the one.
Oh, yeah. And
I decided to watch it.
The Legend Goes On or something like that?
The Legend Goes On.
Is that what it's called? Okay, yeah.
The only place I could find it was separated into, I forget, 9 parts, I think, on YouTube.
Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't
there
know
are
that
a
was
few
on
movies
there.
you can do it. I tend to go for the bona fide experience, though.
Yes. Yeah. So back in elementary school, I didn't care about that. I just wanted to watch whatever. So, I'd go on there. I'd find Sleepaway Camp. I'd find, I think I watched the first half of Cujo on there.
Uh-huh.
Didn't care for that at the time because I don't know. Who knows what, elementary school me was thinking. But I did find,
Jason.
I don't, but I did find
Correct.
The Shining, but I didn't. It's YouTube, so they can't have certain scenes in there.
So you watched a fragmented version of The Shining in elementary school.
Yes, and so it was
that
probably split in
so much.
Yeah, probably split into 10 parts or something. And
oh my goodness,
3 of the parts were taken down for copyright. One of them, they just couldn't show what was happening in the scene. If you've seen the movie, you probably know which part I'm talking about.
Sure.
And so, that was the first time I watched it, but I've probably seen it, 30 times since.
Oh, goodness.
Maybe. I'm just guessing.
I did not know it was that many.
I'm guessing. I've seen it a lot. I loved it. If you would have asked me a year ago, it probably my favorite movie. I have no idea what my favorite movie is now, so I can't, definitively say that. But
let's just say it's The Shining, just to lend some gravitas to this.
Sure.
Episode.
Yeah. Honestly. Yeah.
I'm curious. So you watched the fragmented weird version in elementary school.
Yes.
Do you remember what your reaction was at the time? Did you love it that first time?
I remember, the Here's Johnny part, me being like, oh, that's that. And then I think that's it. That's it. That was the main takeaway I got from it.
But it was enough for you to go back eventually.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there was only then, I assume, when you realize the classic it truly was.
I wish I knew exactly when that was. But...
somewhere around viewing 17, probably.
Probably. Probably. Somewhere around there, yeah.
That's interesting. Weirdly enough, I have not an entirely dissimilar experience. The first time I saw it was in the summer of 2014. And that was about a year after I'd really started getting into movies in earnest. I really thought, this is an art form I really want to invest myself in. And so at the time, I was sort of trying to expand my knowledge, even if it meant not actually watching the movies, just sort of knowing about them. And I remember I found this list of, I was going through the decades one at a time, and I found a list of the best movies of the 80s. And of course, as it is with many similar lists, The Shining was on there, and I had never heard of it. I saw Jack Nicholson. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the guy who played the Joker in that Batman movie I really like. And I was like, it's based on a Stephen King movie. I've heard that name. I was very malinformed at the time. And so I remember, and it was weird because if memory serves, it was just before my family went on a little road trip to not to the mountains, but through the mountains to the Four Corners area where those four states meet up at once. And so it was weird seeing this movie about this isolated location and then immediately sort of living it out in a way. And I remember watching it then and being interested by it, but not really captivated. I was not prepared for how insidious and creeping into your soul the movie is. Like, I was expecting something a little bit more traditionally exciting from the horror genre, so to speak. And I didn't get it, and I wasn't completely on board with it. And so it was actually a very long time before I rewatched it. Just this past winter, because Dr. Sleep was coming out, I'm like, I'm going to rewatch The Shining. Why not? And I fell in love with it. It was so much better than I was able to grasp at the time. And getting to watch it again last night at like 2 a.m. was just, it gets even better every time. And so I can't wait to keep watching it over and over again throughout my life.
Oh, it's a movie I find myself watching once, maybe twice a year, honestly. Whether it's just showing someone who, everyone knows The Shining, but honestly, not a lot of people have sat down and watched The Shining beginning to end, because, it's pretty long, or long for some people. It's
longer than most movies.
Yes, for some people's standards. And, some people have just seen a couple clips and will say like, oh yeah, I've seen it. So I have found myself actually like, interrogating people, being like, oh really? So what happens in this part? If you don't know, I'm going to make you watch it right now. It's just, it's kind of one of those movies where like
I'm picturing them like wanting to get up and leave.
Oh no, they do.
Like,
they
hold
do.
on.
Yeah. Hold on. What happens in this part? Yeah.
Jason, I'm hungry.
I feel like living in Colorado, it feels almost necessary for you to watch it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my next point that I wanted to bring up. Okay. So, the movie The Shining, let's just get some sort of basic nuts and bolts out of the way. So it is based on the Stephen King novel from, I believe, the 70s. Have you read the book of The Shining, Jason?
No, I've never read a single Stephen King book.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't read it either. If I had more time, I might have tried to crank it out, but I regret not having that information. But evidently it does deviate a lot. So it would be interesting to see.
Yes, I've heard some of the comparisons. Yeah.
Yeah. It is directed by Stanley Kubrick, of course. And I found out that the way this sort of came about is a fascinating story, because it was his first movie after Barry Lyndon, which we've seen together in theaters with our other friend Guy.
Yep.
It was so great. I love that movie so much.
Beautiful.
And what happened was that came out and it was not a huge hit. It was just not what people were in the mood for. And it's on one hand, it's easy to see why. It's this period piece that's incredibly long. It's over 3 hours. Yeah. And it's, how should I describe it? It's this weird kind of drama that you almost can't help but laugh at and get giddy about in certain times.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a comedy, kind of confusing. I remember seeing it in theaters and just being like confused on whether I was supposed to laugh or not, but in a good way.
I think you are.
Yeah.
I think you are. And especially when you see the final like ending, what's the word, intertitle card of the movie that really just ties it all together. And we're going to get into this later. I actually feel kind of similarly about The Shining, especially in the first act when it comes to that sort of insidious comedy, but it wasn't a huge hit. And so it was decided that, okay, maybe Stanley should do like a movie that'll appeal to the masses a little bit more. And so what happened was that Stanley Kubrick, I forget if he decided outright to do a horror movie or if it just sort of organically formed, but he got a bunch of horror novels and sort of sequestered himself into his office at one point. And his secretary tells the story of hearing repeatedly Stanley grabbing a book, reading the first few pages, and then like tossing it at the wall out of sheer frustration. Like if it didn't grasp him, I can totally see that.
Yeah.
If it didn't grasp him within just a couple of pages, then it wasn't worthy. But at one point she realized, wait a second, I haven't heard a book hit the wall in a while. And as it turns out, that was The Shining.
Yeah.
And it was written by Stephen King, who, and I might be getting some details wrong, but it was after he visited the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado one night and got the idea of sort of this cabin fever related story of like a haunted hotel and stuff. And so what they did was they did not actually film it at the Stanley Hotel, which I didn't know until like just last night. And they built a soundstage in England. So that all that iconic imagery of the hotel you see, that's all a soundstage, it's really immaculate. So that was actually a surprise to me. But
yeah.
What happened was last night.
Yeah, I was about to say, where were you last night?
I knew I'm going to be talking about The Shining tomorrow. And as you probably know, Jason and I live in the beautiful rectangular state of Colorado. And I decided the Stanley Hotel is only like an hour away. I should go there. And it was like 11 o'clock at night. And so sure enough, I got in the car. I drove through the mountains all the way to Estes Park, which I actually do all the time. It's one of my favorite places to go, but I never gone there specifically to see the hotel. And it takes you up this like winding road that's even creepier at night. And I got there and I walk inside, and I had called ahead and they were fine with this, that I could like sort of look at the hotel a little bit. But I go inside and there isn't a soul to be seen. And it's this huge, just vast lobby that you go into. There's like an old car there and it's got the carpets and stuff.
Yeah, like a weirdly like long, skinny lobby.
Yeah. It's
not kind of eerie.
It's sort of, it goes long way, right?
Yeah, not a grand room, but a long room.
And so I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the scariest thing ever. And so I started walking around the hotel a little bit, just sort of trying to get a sense of it. And then at one point I wind up back in the lobby and I look at the desk 1 second, I look away, and then I look back and there's someone standing there and I just about jumped out of my skin.
You didn't tell me that part.
Yeah, I wanted to keep it a secret.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh gosh, hey. And so I go up and I say, hey, my name is Sam and I do a podcast about movies. And in the middle of that sentence, I realized this is the start of like a Kevin Smith movie.
That is exactly how Tusk started.
Yeah, I got really terrified. And what made it worse was that, or not worse, but just more memorable, was that I don't know if they do this on purpose. I like to think that they do. The AC, the air conditioner in like the lobby and a lot of the hotels the rooms, I should say, on the bottom floor, has this high-pitched hum to it that sounds exactly like that weird violin string that just goes throughout the movie.
And reverberation like, violin thing. This is scary sounds.
This is some real traumatizing stuff you're doing here, Stanley Hotel. And I go downstairs and I look around and there are a bunch of posters, not for the movie The Shining, directed by Stanley Kubrick, but for the 1997 miniseries produced by Stephen King, who took a lot of issue with Stanley Kubrick's movie.
Yeah, I believe he wanted to make. You say 97? Is that when it was?
Yes.
Okay, I believe he like just really wanted to make that after seeing The Shining Kubrick one because it was not what he wanted. There's a few sections that kind of. It's like a middle finger to Stephen King of the actual Shining movie. Yeah. There's a few moments in there. So I remember him just wanting to make like a definitive adaptation of his novel, including the weird stuff that I'm glad wasn't included. But
yeah, where like the hedges come to life.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's very strange. I have not actually seen that miniseries. From what I've heard,
I've not either.
Not great.
I've heard mostly negative things about it, but I remember working with a man who said it was his favorite movie of all time.
The 97 miniseries?
Yes. I remember.
That's so weird.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, I will check it out because I trust you, I guess.
And you never did.
I never did. But it's still in my watch list of things to watch, so yeah. I'll get around to it.
We all have just huge watch lists.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And so I was sort of weirded out because I guess there was no reference made to Stanley Kubrick's movie whatsoever. So I almost wonder if they have like struck a deal with Stephen King or something.
I'm gonna
I actually
assume
don't know.
So
It would make sense because they actually did film the miniseries at the Stanley Hotel. So it
Oh,
makes
they did.
sense that
Okay,
they would
see, I didn't know that.
associate with
I didn't
that
actually know that. Okay,
a
that
little
makes
more.
that makes a lot of sense because I
A
remember
little
taking a tour there. Just gonna say, if you ever go there, don't take the tour. It's interesting, but they will make you not believe in ghosts going on
There
that
are
tour.
a few places that you can't go unless you take the tour. So
Yeah,
I regretted that I wasn't able to see those places,
I
but
I think the way you did it actually is the way to go
because you
because
got to understand, it was like midnight and there wasn't anyone there.
yeah,
And it's like this building where all the doors are open so anyone can just walk in
yeah,
and there's just no one there. And you're walking around as there's like just ambient noise. And it really, really got me in the mood. And then
yeah.
I was going to go right home and watch the movie. And this is a tangent. It has nothing to do with the actual movie, but I just feel
Okay,
responsible for telling this
of
story. I
course,
was
yeah.
driving back home the way I came through the mountains. And I see along the way someone stranded on the side of the road
No,
and is holding out their thumb. I'm like,
no.
if I get murdered, like helping a hitchhiker after going to see the Stanley Hotel in preparation for a podcast about The Shining, it will make the news. I'm doing it. I
Probably.
pulled over.
You
Yeah.
did? No way. Oh my
Yes.
god.
It was someone,
Oh my
their
god.
car broke down. I will say this. I actually told them about the podcast. So, Izzy, if you're listening, hi. Hope you made it to work okay.
Hi, Izzy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
I gave this person a ride 15 minutes to their friend's house. And I was like,
Wow.
yeah, it was crazy. I will never forget it as long as
Yeah,
I live. And
that's interesting.
I know some people might be freaking out. I was freaking out too, but I was
Yeah.
like, I will regret not doing this because I
Oh,
just
yeah.
have that much kindness in my
Oh, I'll
heart.
be honest. I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I would not have done that. Yeah, but
And
good
you
for
know
you.
what? I don't think anyone could be too upset, but I thought this would make a fantastic story. I hope it did.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
That's wild.
So I was reading up on The Shining a little bit, and I found out a few interesting behind the scenes facts. One of them was that I already knew that the production was really troublesome for a variety of reasons that we'll get into, but it was just most of it amounted to it just taking so long. I think it took, if I remember correctly, it took somewhere in the ballpark of a year to film, which was
Yeah.
way over schedule, to the point where it actually delayed Raiders of the Lost Ark being filmed
Oh,
on the
really?
same on the same studios or the same set or something. So we actually got Raiders of the Lost Ark a year or so later than we were supposed to because of The Shining.
Okay.
How fascinating is that?
Interesting. I think
But the other
Gremlins
one,
has a weird history with that too. Sorry.
yes, it does.
Yeah.
They both they weave together.
They do. They do.
I found out a few other actors besides Jack Nicholson that were considered for the role of Jack Torrance, and I gotta admit, these are all good actors, but I cannot imagine any of them. The three, evidently, that were the closest to being cast: Robert De Niro.
Okay. Okay. I have no idea about this. Go on.
That would be. I honestly can't see it. Robert De Niro is a quite good actor, especially at this time. I honestly can't see it. It would have been really just so much different. Plus, he was doing Raging Bull instead, so I think everything worked out okay.
Yeah.
The other one, and this one blew my mind: Robin Williams. Robin Williams is Jack Torrance.
You know what?
What kind of butterfly effect universe would we live in had that come to pass?
I think that could have been good, actually.
You think so?
I think under Stanley Kubrick, I think that could have been amazing.
How would Robin Williams have turned out differently, though, after working with Stanley Kubrick? You think? I mean,
True.
I like to think that everyone on the set would have had a more fun time because Robin Williams was there.
So I do think Jack Nicholson would have been better, but I think Robin Williams under Stanley Kubrick would have been really good. I don't know if he was doing like anything other than comedy, maybe drama roles at that time. I don't know his history of things, but it would have been interesting.
It really would have been. Yeah. And the third one, and this one, I laughed for a solid 10 minutes at the idea of Harrison Ford playing Jack Torrance.
Yeah.
Hey, Lloyd. Slow night. That's all I got.
I can see it. I feel like, when he gets mad in movies, it's pretty scary.
It's scary, but
It's something like familiar.
it's
Like,
almost in a funny way, though. It's like Harrison Ford, even in the 80s, had almost this like sort of crotchety older guy kind of vibe to him, you know, where just everything sort of irritated him a little bit. And apparently this is somewhat based on fact.
Yeah.
I know he's
yeah,
a notoriously bad interview, for
yeah,
instance.
yeah. Unless he's with Ryan Gosling, but
I
go on.
guess so. Ryan really brings the Ford out of Harrison. But yeah, I honestly just trying to picture any of those in this role is so strange.
Yeah, and I'm sure some of them could be good in it, but none of them would be as good as Jack Nicholson. I think he was, and I hate saying born for this role because that's just a weird thing to say, but I genuinely think him and Shelley Duvall were born for this role. Like, it is some of the two of the best performances I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. So, let's just segue right into the movie. I just want to say right up front, we're going to assume you've seen the movie. So we're not going to really be coy about giving away the ending or the plot points or anything. So if you haven't seen The Shining for whatever reasons, for the love of God, do yourself a favor and check out The Shining and thank us later once you listen back. Jason, why don't you give sort of the basic premise of this movie? Like, if you had to describe it to someone, if you had to pitch it to someone, what would you say?
So, there is a man.
Yes.
And somehow he gets kind of selected to be the caretaker for a very popular, what would I call it? Resort?
A hotel, Jason.
Hotel resort.
Yes.
It's a whole thing.
It's a hotel like specifically meant for the summer season, because they say that they're closed during the winter because the storms are just
weird.
So bad.
It's weird and kind of...
It's a weird setup, yeah.
Yeah. So basically this hotel is vacant during the winter because...
From I believe it's November through May, or it might even be October through May. So that is more than half a year of being alone in this nearly empty building all to yourself while you're trapped and can't go anywhere and are cut off from the outside world for 7 months.
Exactly. So we get a little bit of history from the beginning interview, letting the audience know that it's been a thing before. People going there, bringing their families.
The proprietor of the hotel who's interviewing Jack Nicholson in that opening scene is played by Barry Nelson, who is the first live-action James Bond. A lot of people don't know
What
that.
do you mean?
Before Sean Connery, there was an episode of the television series Climax in 1954 where they adapted Casino Royale into like a 1 hour program. And it was James Bond is American in that, Jimmy Bond, and it's really, really lo-fi. But Peter Lorre from M plays Le Chiffre, and that's kind of the only fun part about it. It's watchable, especially because it's short, but it's not that great. But technically, Sean Connery was not the first James Bond. It was this guy.
That's interesting, because now that you say that, I could see this guy as kind of being like a, old James Bond.
Yeah.
The way he kind of hunches over his desk. I don't know.
Granted, it was 26 years earlier.
Exactly. But yeah, so we learned through the interview that people have done this before, and it didn't work out that well.
Yeah.
For past caretakers of the hotel, and so Jack Nicholson's character decides to bring his family up so they can take care of the hotel.
We meet Wendy and Danny.
Living in Denver. Oh, wait, no, not in Denver. Boulder.
It's in Boulder.
Jack Nicholson works in Denver. I think so, yes. Yeah. So something Boulder, like we see them, they seem kind of like a normal, mom and son. But there's a little bit of like a hidden backstory there that we can kind of guess on.
Because Danny is brushing his teeth one night and just sort of has an episode, like we never find out exactly what happens, but he sort of just totally blanks out. And so they call, I assume, a doctor of some kind. And Shelley Duvall as Wendy tells the story of previous injury in which Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson, which is convenient, came home one night and had been sipping a bit of the old alcohol.
Yep.
And went to grab Danny's arm and ripped it out of the socket. Just grabbed a little bit too hard. And so that inspired him to say, Wendy, I'm not touching alcohol anymore. That's it. I'm on the wagon.
And as Wendy says, it's just one of those things you do a million times and it never hurts anyone.
Mm-hmm.
But this time it just happened too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, kind of a defense for Jack.
Yeah.
And the immediate cutaway to the doctor is fantastic.
And right off the bat, we get this sense of just impending dread. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like it's almost the most unsettling thing about this movie is the way it never, even as the horror escalates, it never changes style, really.
Yeah.
It always has the same feel to it. And it creates this environment in which you really believe that there is just insanity everywhere waiting for its opportunity to just burst out and attack everything around. Like there's this thing I always think about. Jason and I are not in the same room right now. We're doing this over a call. But if we were in the same room, let's just imagine that we are. The only thing, hypothetically, between you and me trying to murder each other is 3 days without food. That would be all it takes. And our entire friendship is out the window and we are killing and eating each other. Like, I know it's a morbid thing, but
no,
I
love you, man, but it's food. Like, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I wouldn't be that tasty. I do not have a lot of fat whatsoever. So I apologize in advance for that day that hopefully never comes.
I'll forgive you.
But I think about things like that all the time, how there is just this capacity for evil, just as much as there is a capacity for good in every single aspect of life. Everywhere, everything has the potential for everything. And we see in the first act of this movie, this is what I was referencing earlier with sort of the weird, dark comedy of it. The writing is almost comically on the wall from the first few establishing scenes. So we have this hotel that is isolated and completely abandoned. We have the weather conditions, which will stop them from being able to leave or go anywhere or indeed communicate with anyone because the radio lines and stuff eventually get switched off. We have a recovering alcoholic who is on the wagon and has a history of abuse.
Yeah, 5 months, not too long on the wagon, but sure.
Oh yeah, but enough to probably still be feeling the symptoms of withdrawal. Then,
for sure.
What really pushes it over the edge, and it just, I just love this moment for so many reasons. As they show up at the hotel, they're getting a tour, and the tour guide, offhand, like with almost no regard whatsoever, says, "Oh yeah, and this hotel was built on an Indian burial ground."
Yeah, which I think I'm probably wrong. I think that's like a main part of the book. I'm not.
I think so too. I'm not positive.
Sure.
If someone correct us in the comments, but the way that he just sort of throws that out without even thinking of it is so morbidly funny to me. The way that they think nothing is going to happen, and then on top of that, they say in that same exact tone, apparently the original builders of this hotel actually had to fight off some Indians.
Yeah,
they were trying to reclaim the land that was stolen from them, and instead, so this hotel is cursed immediately.
Yeah.
And it is just so weirdly scary and funny to me at the same time. And then also the nail in the coffin is as they're driving up and they just randomly bring up the Donner Party. Like, okay, this is the movie we're in for.
Yeah, which is when you can kind of start noticing Jack being like already fed up with everything. Mm-hmm. I'll even say like when he's calling in the beginning, the first moment you see between him and Shelley Duvall is like he's already like annoyed.
Yeah.
But that whole sequence where they are, walking around the hotel is just scary for so many reasons. Of course, like you said, they're mentioning Indian burial grounds and stuff. And that's, nowadays we know that that's like a major red flag for any horror movie.
I'm sure it was a red flag at the time.
Do you think it was? You think it was?
I feel like that we could be so wrong here. I feel like that goes back a while. The old
because I just remember hearing about that with that and like Poltergeist, and I think that's it. Like, yeah,
I'm sure it comes from some long.
I'm sure it does too.
We're not as well versed in it as we should.
Yeah. But there's so many little things about that whole sequence, like the guy who doesn't speak, like the other guy in the interview, who I think introduces himself in that first part where he meets Jack, but then for the rest of it, he's just following them and staring dead at them.
Yeah.
Like if you just focus on him, you'll be like, all right, something's up here, and it's not from them, from the people who run it, but like something's up, something scary here.
And then just to sort of
little things.
Just to sort of set the last final pieces of the stage, the one other thing that we find out before the movie sort of really kicks into the actual, meat of it, is we find out that Danny
this is a big part,
is psychic.
Yep.
And is not the only one. They meet Dick Halloran, played by Scatman Crothers, and they start communicating telepathically, and we find out that it is just an ability that some people possess, not a lot, but they do exist out there, and they have this ability of reading each other's minds and sort of being able to tap into sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of the essence of a place.
Exactly. It's the history of it's the history of a place. Anything that's really happened to that place, or anything that will happen to that place, you kind of tap into it. Exactly.
And that is where the title comes from. They call that ability The Shining.
Yeah,
and thus
vague for a reason. Kind of.
It is very vague for a reason.
Powers of it, I guess.
I have no idea if this is true or not. I read that Stephen King came up with that from the John Lennon song "We All Shine On."
Interesting. Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised. That seems like the kind of thing that could very easily happen. And thus the movie is set in motion, and we're off on this cabin fever night that slowly and methodically just gets more and more claustrophobic, and we start finding out
very slowly.
Very slowly. It's again, it's not a short movie, but it's for a reason. And we just start finding out more things about the hotel and about Torrance family, and things just get crazier and crazier until eventually the fire axe is brought up, and you know what happens from there.
You've seen it.
So the first thing that really strikes me is we see that Jack is a writer and has decided, I'm going to use this solitude to get a lot of time working on my novel or whatever. One of the first things, my writing project, one of the first things we see him doing is throwing a tennis ball against the wall and catching it. So that's his idea of working hard. And one of the early scenes is we see Shelley Duvall go up to Jack at his typewriter in this big like lounge or whatever, and you can tell he's sort of irritated, and then eventually he snaps at her. And it really struck me this time around that, and I'm sure, I'm positive actually, as a result of the events of the past several months in the real world, where a lot of us have been staying at home, sort of sequestered with our families or our friends or what have you. And I found myself almost sort of being like, yeah, I know that feeling of just every little thing someone does is just really irritating. And then I realized I'm a monster. I am relating.
No, you realize it's you and not them. It's you just like picking apart little things. And it is cabin fever. Like that's exactly what that is. So I'm sure we've all experienced that at least recently.
Yeah. And it is at this point where we should probably bring up Shelley Duvall a little bit, because it is well documented that Shelley Duvall was treated horrendously on the set at the request of Stanley Kubrick himself, who told everyone there, it was a small crew, and told everyone there, don't be nice to Shelley. Everyone be the worst to her, and so it will get a better performance. And I gotta say, I'm not about that. As much as it made
it's like I hate that. I think method acting stuff like that is that's not exactly method acting, but I think
it's
that
method
kind of
acting
stuff is ridiculous. I can't stand it either.
It's method acting, but it's being forced upon her by others. It's not her decision. It's not like Leonardo DiCaprio choosing to grab a fish out of a river and bite it. This is, which listen, we all have our feelings on method acting. Personally, I don't think it's particularly necessary. That's why we have acting. That's why we have
exactly. If you can do the same thing without having to spend months getting into that character, like if you can do it within a day or two, I think you're a better actor.
And listen, it's if an actor chooses to do methods like that, then that is their decision. I can't tell them not to. Again, I really don't think it's necessary most of the time, but it has made for some fun results. This is just downright abuse. And not only that, it is abuse stemming from sort of a lack of faith. It's as if Kubrick didn't think that Shelley Duvall could pull it off without going to these heinous lengths.
Yeah, like he, didn't realize that she was a fantastic actress before, which is ridiculous because she's amazing. In everything I've seen, honestly. And
then you just hear the stories that she's told since about how her hair was falling out, and it was just some of the most stressful working conditions ever, especially, and it makes it all the more callous when Jack Nicholson tells stories and says like, yeah, Stanley and I got along fine. And it's like, okay, so this is Stanley clearly singling out Shelley Duvall.
Exactly.
I'm like, Stan, my man.
Yeah.
Stop it. For God's sake. There are certain directors like that. Yeah. But listen, this is a serious conversation though, because you have to think the type of horror that you see in Shelley Duvall's face throughout this movie, you can tell it's coming from a very real place, and it makes it that much scarier. So as horrifying as it is, I'm going to sound like a monster right now, but the proof is in the pudding. But also, I seriously don't think it was worth it. And
I know exactly what you're saying. It wasn't worth it. It shouldn't have been done. But every moment she is on screen, I can tell exactly what the movie wants me to think, what the conditions are like in the actual story of it. Like it is terrifying when she's scared of Jack, like during that scene where he snaps, or when she realizes that he's snapping. Like it is some of the most genuine reactions I've ever seen to anything. Mm-hmm. It's terrifying, but like you said, it's not worth it.
It does help that they as my understanding goes, they more or less filmed the movie in order of when the scenes happen, so they were able to really capture that deterioration. So listen, it is effective. I'm going to come out and say right now, this is one of the greatest movies of all time, and I know you agree. So it's just this morbid thought of, would it have turned out as good or worse or better or whatever? Who's to say? We may never know. And I know it's sort of a melancholy thing. So I think we've sort of touched on various aspects of the movie. Let's jump around a little bit. Well, what we start to see is that, and I feel like I understood it more this time around than I ever did. Yeah. We start to see the hotel sort of worm its way into Jack Nicholson's mind to the point of sort of transporting him back in time to the early days, to the actual 1920s.
1921, yeah.
And it's visualized very interestingly because we see him go up to this bar and we see him clearly insane, thirsting for alcohol.
Yeah. And he even knows he's insane in this scene. You can tell on his face that he knows that he's not really talking to anyone, but he doesn't care.
And he goes, "Hi, Lloyd. Slow night." And then the camera shifts, and there's Joe Turkel from Blade Runner, Eldon Tyrell, who had actually worked with Stanley Kubrick before in Paths of Glory. So little returning cast member there. Yeah. And this is when we first start to see that it's as if the hotel, again, which is this haunted demonic presence that is cursed permanently, and the curse will likely never be lifted.
Yeah.
And it's preying on Jack's vulnerability from all of this frustration and all of the, again, like the withdrawal symptoms and everything. And we see that he's the only one that really breaks. So actually, he's really the weakest of them all. And I really like seeing that the way that the hotel slowly overcomes him. Like there's a small detail where when he first sees Lloyd, the bartender, looks in his wallet, says, "Looks like I'm a little short, Lloyd." And then the second time he sees him, he has money. Yeah. Now there are a few ways to read that. It is either A, that he was lying and just didn't want to, pay him the first time or whatever. I don't think it's that. I think it's a little bit of a cop-out. What I think is that it's sort of manifesting itself physically. It's almost like, I'm going to give it away early. So it's almost like the movie Solaris, which is about the space station where the planet that it's orbiting can sort of reach into the minds of anyone near it and manifest their memories physically. And that's what happens when this psychologist goes there. And he starts seeing his dead wife back to life again and really starts to lose his mind over it. And I feel like it's kind of the exact same thing. It's the Hotel Solaris.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because it does exactly what the planet does in Solaris. Is it just kind of like feeds into? I haven't seen Solaris in a long time, but insecurities about drinking, being in charge. There's like a hint of misogyny in The Shining.
A hint.
Yeah, like
it's a healthy serving.
It's a healthy dose. Yeah.
Yeah. And we use healthy facetiously. An unhealthy.
Unhealthy dose.
A hefty dose.
Yeah. Perhaps. Yeah. But exactly. Yeah. So it's. I was actually going to bring up Solaris, kind of.
Oh, weird.
That was yeah.
Was that your? Let's jump ahead.
Yeah,
we do recommendations every week. Was that your recommendation?
It was one of them. I was going to decide which one it was going to be, but it was maybe going to be that one.
Okay, that was actually mine. That is my recommendation to go along with The Shining.
Cool. I'll come up with a different one.
We'll hear yours a little bit later. So another scene that really grabbed me this time around was when you can tell very early on that Wendy and Danny are afraid of Jack, and as they should be. I want to say Jack Nicholson is a great actor, but he's very good at having that scary presence, of just a guy that you do not want to mess with, and to the point where they're afraid to go into the room where he's sleeping because they're afraid they're going to disturb him. And if that's not an abusive relationship in a nutshell, I don't know what is.
Yeah, and sorry, go on.
We see Danny go in wanting to really quietly get some toys or something, and there's Jack awake and says, "Come here, son." And it's scary to watch.
It's probably the scariest scene of the whole movie,
which is weird because nothing actually happens. They just sort of have a little conversation, but it's just the terror of Danny there that Danny Lloyd is so great at expressing all throughout the entire movie. Yeah,
Danny Lloyd's just looking at the other side of the room the entire scene, just out of it, but just wanting to be out of it.
I read that the reason he got cast was that he was really good at being able to sort of focus on things for a long period of time, and so could really get into that character and sort of live
he is good at that. Yeah,
he's really quite good. They almost got Cary Guffey, the little boy from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but the parents objected heavily to that, and I think I do not blame them.
Yeah.
So I think it worked out fine.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, just that one scene, it sort of plants the seeds and lets you know everything you need to know about what it's like to live with this guy, especially for such a prolonged period of time. And then just the horrors keep mounting. Like they have to switch the radio off because the storms are interfering too much. And then at one point, Jack goes up and just takes the fuses out of it, which is just pure evil.
The way he just kind of juggles them in his hand. Just scary.
Here's a question I have for you, Jason.
Go for it.
So let's say exact same setup where this family is assigned to care for a hotel and Danny is psychic and Jack is a recovering alcoholic. If it was any other hotel, if it wasn't specifically this haunted, cursed place with just this horrendous history to it, do you think it would have worked out all right? Do you think there just would have been a few roadblocks along the way and then they would have gotten over it and been a happy family? Or do you think
I don't think
something was bound to happen?
I don't think, of course, I don't think it would have been this bad. But from early on, before Jack's even really been living at the hotel, you can just see little fragments of a weird kind of like a unmentioned history in the family. And that's honestly one of my favorite parts about the movie is that there's like weird subtext that you can basically project onto most scenes. And
you get the sense that there's something we don't know.
Yeah.
Like there's like maybe Wendy was lying or something.
Yeah. And there's countless, interpretations of sexual abuse onto Danny or just, regular physical abuse. And that's one of the many reasons that I think that it wouldn't really work at any other hotel, but it wouldn't have been this bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think there's a reason that this hotel was haunted, because otherwise it would have been a little too much. And so you bring up sort of a lot of the interpretations and reading into the movies. This movie is the source of a lot of conspiracy theories.
Yes.
Specifically having to do with, among other things, that this movie is confirming, in air quotes, that Stanley Kubrick faked the moon landings in 1969.
From the sweater and people have
eagle,
other reasons. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, this was there was a documentary called Room 237, which I understand sort of addresses this a little bit. Have you seen that, Jason?
Yes, I have. I feel like I had to, when it first came out, because it seemed like the perfect thing to watch for a Shining fan, because I honestly think it's such a masterful movie that it's like almost neatly wrapped up, on surface level, but then there's all these little things here and there that hint at some outwardly message or something. There's infinite interpretations of this movie, in my opinion. And so I think a documentary inviting people on to tell you about those interpretations is an amazing idea, but just the way it was handled wasn't as great. I don't know, 30% of the interpretations were interesting, and then the rest of them were like, I don't know, it sounded like people got like, way too high and was like, oh, this looks like this, and it doesn't. But
they didn't have an angle going in either.
They didn't, but it just kind of reminds you of the beauty of the movie, that there are so many little, maybe trigger moments isn't the best way to say it, but like trigger moments as in like, oh, maybe this means this, but then something later on in the movie, contradicts that. And it's just this whole like puzzle of a movie that's not too intricate that it becomes like muddled, but I think it's just a perfect combination of mystery and, telling you exactly what's happening.
Interesting. So you mentioned some of the various sort of mysteries of the movie. I want to talk about possibly the biggest one, which is the very ending.
Yes.
So we see Jack got lost in the maze after this big chase, was chasing Danny and Wendy with an axe, and gets frozen there, and eventually they escape. And then we see the camera inside the hotel very slowly zooms in on a picture on the wall that evidently was taken in 1921, and there's Jack Nicholson at the grand opening of the hotel.
Front row.
What do you think that's all about, Jason? As someone who's seen the movie many times.
You're going to be disappointed. I don't know.
Really?
I have different opinions every time I watch it. Sometimes I'll even just think like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like that was probably something that was just added on, you think
they would do that? You think they would do that without
I don't
having
think it is.
in mind?
Sometimes I've watched it though and thought that like, oh yeah, I've watched a lot of horror movies where it's, neatly wrapped, and then in the last, second they do something to like, I don't know, trick the audience into talking about it later, but it wasn't, warranted at all. So sometimes
to try and finish strong.
Yeah. So sometimes I've thought like, oh, they didn't need to do that. And like, that doesn't really make sense. And other times I've been like, oh, it's like, evil manifesting like in places for, I don't know, like evil staying in places for the history of that place. I don't know. It's such a great ending because I've never had a conversation with anyone about it where we had the exact same interpretation of it. Yeah.
Interesting.
What about you?
The way I've seen it these past two couple of... We went immediately with that one.
Yeah.
The way I've seen it these past couple of times that I've watched it is sort of the conclusion of what I was mentioning earlier, how the hotel is slowly sort of... What's a good visual metaphor here? Like the water of the hotel is slowly submerging Jack Nicholson completely, and that is the final straw, where it has not only led him to like his death, presumably from freezing in the snow, it's not only driven him completely insane, but it's literally sort of swallowed him up into its actual history. Like it is that supernaturally powerful that it can actually do that. And I don't think he was in that picture until the end. I think that happened just ethereally somehow. The photograph was edited after Jack died. I think that's what happened.
Probably,
but
yeah.
Of course, it could be many things. That's the way I look at it. Is that it is digested its prey essentially, and that was
Yeah.
sort of the final right. And I was looking really closely at that photograph at the end. I was looking for Grady, the guy that Jack meets in the bathroom.
Yeah.
I didn't spot him. He might be there.
I
have no
don't
idea.
believe he's there. I purposely try to stay away from any online discourses about like the meaning of the ending, because I honestly just I know that there's no definitive explanation for it, so I don't want to read through other people's interpretations really. I just want it to I like it to be almost different every single time, so that it is a new movie every single time. And and it is, I don't know if people knew about this before, but just this past year, I saw someone on Twitter mention that there is a quick moment where Jack Nicholson breaks the fourth wall and looks like right down the barrel of the camera.
Really?
Yeah. The moment where he's in the hotel room with Wendy, he yells at her. Is
this when he has like the axe?
No, I think it's after the whole 237 room sequence. When he goes back in there to talk to her, and then I might be wrong, but I believe she says like, "Oh, we need to go," and then he's like, "Oh, you would love that, wouldn't you?" That might be in a different room though. I can't remember. But he kind of storms out of the room, and the camera kind of pans with him to the door. And during that pan, if you pause it, you can see him looking like right at the camera, which seems incredibly intentional. Like if you watch it, when you hear about it now, it's like, oh, it's just like one of those things like no one noticed probably. He just looked in the camera, whatever. But you watch it
with the number of takes that Kubrick did, it's weird.
Exactly.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah, that like meticulous attention to detail. It seems purposeful. Just watching it last night, I noticed that when Dick Halloran walks in the room, or when Danny and Dick Halloran like first meet in that group of all of them, before they're off, with each other, Danny is glued to him from the minute he shakes his hand.
I noticed the exact same thing.
Yeah. That I never noticed that before. Watching it this time.
They really developed this conversation.
Yeah.
We haven't talked a whole lot about Dick Halloran. I love the way Scatman Crothers plays this role. The way that he clearly knows like this is not gonna turn out right. And when it's after that initial setup, when they're left at the hotel, the first time we see him again at like that awesome vacation house in Miami.
He's chilling sockless.
He's sort of, but if you look at his face, he's like deeply troubled. You can tell he's like, oh gosh, anything could have happened. And so I love how devoted he is eventually when he realizes that the power's gone out. He's like, okay, I'm flying to Denver right this second. Like he leaves immediately and then calls the guy at the rental office, who's played by Tony Burton, who was Apollo Creed's sort of ringside manager in the Rocky movies. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was like, I know that guy from somewhere. Yes, that's it. So that's fun.
Okay. Yeah. I had no idea about that.
And gets there and is just unceremoniously axed, literally.
Oh my God.
It's
such
really,
a scary jump scare.
Is it the movie's only jump scare? I'm sure there's another.
I mean, it does jump scares with titles. It did that when they're walking in the maze in the beginning, and there's just this rising music, and you're like, "What's going on?" And then it just, it shows Tuesday really quick when the song comes to like a little crash, and that's kind of scary.
As if that means anything. Tuesday in relation to what? Yeah.
So I mean, I believe that the Dick Halloran scene is the only conventional jump scare, but like good conventional jump scare.
Yeah, most of this movie is that really creeping, just sort of worm your way into the mind kind of scare.
A lot of it I think comes from the music. We talked about the weird, vibrating violin music. It's this weird like layer of vocal music that kind of is in the opening. After the boom, 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 it kind of does the not angelic like vocals, but it's like it's terrifying.
It's almost hard to listen to.
It is. No, it hurts. I remember seeing it in theaters, and genuinely, like it hurt me to hear it. A lot of people actually covered their ears. Like it hurt. It could just be a mixing problem, but I like to think it wasn't.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
I would love to see this in the theater. My favorite little vocal cue is the sort of like tinkling piano that's like ding 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 ding. It's like something's up, something's about to happen. This is it really I don't know about you, but I really do connect to this. Just sort of even just the basest fear that this movie is tapping into, that sense of isolation in a huge place where no one is there. They may as well be in outer space. Like that's how isolated they are and how unable to find anyone. And I remember that scene where Jack is breaking down the door and you see Shelley Duvall just terrified him, like unlike ever before. And I just thought to myself, like, if she screams for help, it's useless. Like I really connected to her at that moment, just that fear of it's up to me. I got to do something here. There's no one else around. This is it. This is what it's all led up to. And so I really connected to that. I've been in cabins before in the mountains that are just huge and cavernous, and you're just by sheer coincidence, there's no one there, and you can hear every little gust of wind, and it's really just effective. Like it's not the kind of thing.
Yeah, that's another thing I love about this movie. You're talking about sounds and stuff, like just the atmosphere of the hotel itself. Like you said, it was a set in England somewhere.
Yep.
And they did a fantastic job. You were at the actual hotel yesterday, so you know that the carpets, floors creak, everything just like kind of creaks a little bit, but
it's
not
one of the loudest floors I've ever walked
not
on.
In like a cheesy, like a Scooby-Doo house, but like in a genuinely effective, like, you can hear the sound reverberate off the walls, and it just creates this like atmosphere like no other movie I've ever seen. It's incredible.
There's so much about this movie that we could get into. I have a few other things to mention. Jason, is what else? What else did you have? If anything,
no, go for it. No, you go for it.
So I just wanted to. So one thing I really I've loved every single time is the final reveal. That's sort of the moment, sort of the nail in the coffin when Wendy finally realizes like there is no going back. We are with a killer, and we have got to get out. Is when she finds the book in air quotes that he's been writing, and it's just over and over again for hundreds and hundreds of pages. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And on one hand, I love it because it sort of seals the deal on this image of Jack we've been getting so far, that he's quick to anger and does not have a lot of patience whatsoever. And also that he's supposedly holding himself in this place of being like a great artist or a great writer or something, when in reality, he's actually just going insane and succumbing to his demons, and indeed to the demons of the past. It's almost like, I almost get this sense that it's sort of this microcosm of America itself, just that haunted past, and the way that a lot of people, especially men, especially white men, just sort of find themselves repeating the ills of history, whether they mean it to a lot or not. And a lot of times they're very complicit.
Yeah, and that's hinted throughout the movie too. Whether it's I think Gaumont, I think it's baking powder or something being shown a lot, which features a Native American on the front of it, or the white man's burden scene, which I was like, that's, watching it yesterday, I was like, that's a weird thing to say, especially because it didn't make sense to what the guy said before. So I kind of looked that up, and it was, I should have read more into it, but it's definitely a saying from before.
Yeah, it's a saying very rooted in evil. We won't go into too much detail, but it's basically the idea that, it's so hard to be, the greatest, the superior race, so to speak, and to have to contend with all these underlings. And it is deeply evil and deeply just effed up in every way. So the fact that they just downright just name check that very specific adage from God knows how long ago is very deliberate. And I love just the way that when Wendy has the baseball bat and Jack is going up the stairs, the things he's complaining about are really stupid and petty.
He's signed a contract, and do you have any idea what would happen if I went back on my responsibilities?
Do you have any idea how hard it is for me to do nothing all day?
Yeah.
It really just lays it all out right there. The other reason that I really love that scene is because I'm watching it and I realize someone had to type out hundreds of pages of that.
Yeah, I believe
and you can tell it was Kubrick's secretary,
exactly.
actually.
Yeah,
and you can tell that she was getting kind of bored because like the formatting is different and everything. That was probably a good portion of her job. Like a whole day had to be devoted to, all right, type out as many of these as you possibly can. Hopefully we won't ruin too many for like the number of takes we're doing. And so it's this moment of humanity is peeking through. We've talked about a lot. There is so much that we haven't touched on yet, but there's only so much time in the day. Jason, did you have anything else that you wanted to mention about The Shining?
I guess I've touched on the main things I wanted to mention, which is basically some of the new things that I noticed in this past viewing of it, because I think that is the magic of this movie, is that you can just it's like you can watch it infinite times and find something new every time. And I hate it when people say that, but it's so true here.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we would be remiss if we did not mention the sequel, Dr. Sleep, which we see in The Shining. There's this plot that is not focused on a lot, but it's definitely there, where you get the sense that Danny is meant to sort of embody the experience of being a child with a mental illness, not having anyone to connect to. That's why he relates so heavily to Dick Halloran, and not knowing what is this thing that makes me different from everyone. And so that was really what a lot of Dr. Sleep was tapping into. Did you see that last year, Jason?
I have not. I watched a little bit of it over the summer, about 20 minutes of it, and I was mixed on what I had seen. Some of it I really didn't like, and some of it I thought was pretty effective horror-wise. But I almost watched it today, so...
Oh, weird.
So I'm not totally turned off of it, but I would like to see it again.
Yeah, I really want to see it again too. The first time I saw it, I was not very high on it. I think I was just not in the mood to watch it that day. It was longer than I thought it was. Yeah. It was a stressful time. The holidays just not my favorite time of year, so that was part of it. And I've read a lot of readings and interpretations of it since that have made me curious to go back actually and watch it. Maybe distance myself a little bit from The Shining, try not to view them as sort of like a two-hander.
Yeah.
Look at it as its own thing.
That's the most difficult thing I'm probably going to have trouble with. Because I think that's what happened the first time, or when I started viewing it, as I was like, oh, that's off. I don't like that. Yeah. And
it's a lot different in many ways.
Yeah, and I usually complain when people do that, so I feel like I need to be very open to it.
Yeah, that's something I'm really trying to work on, is especially like sequels to stuff.
Exactly.
Is letting it be its own thing. Yeah. So I hope to be able to appreciate it more than I did the first time.